Ok, nuestro siguiente ponente es Richard Bartle, que acaba de llegar de Tenerife Sur en un vuelo super madrugador de Ryanair. Una difícil experiencia hoy, como todos sabréis. Por eso tenemos que dar las gracias. Thank you, Richard, for coming today. It's been a tough trip this morning.
Yes.
But you made it. Thank you very much. Déjame traducir en directo su presentación. Richard es doctor y profesor honorario de Computer Game Design en la Universidad de Essex, Inglaterra. Es una persona muy conocida en el sector porque coescribió en el año 1978 el primer mundo virtual, paréntesis. Yo particularmente me río bastante del tema Metaverso. Este señor sí que entiende de esto y nos va a explicar cosas muy interesantes al respecto. O sea, que el primer MUD, aquello del Multi-User Dungeon, fue coescrito por él. Un progenitor de una industria que ahora mismo está por los 30 billones de dólares y que va a tener mucho que hablar todavía, ¿no? En 1996, además, describió lo que se llama el modelo de los tipos de jugadores, que ha sido adoptado ampliamente por la industria de los MMOs. En el 2003 escribió un libro muy interesante que se llama Designing Virtual Worlds, Diseñando mundos virtuales, y es el texto estándar que os aconsejamos leáis para este tipo de presentaciones. Y en el 2010, además, obtuvo un premio como prestigioso de desarrolladores de juegos en la conferencia online como Legion Award. Su charla que nos va a dar hoy se titula MMOs and the Metaverse y trata de cómo la gente cree que el metaverso afectará a los juegos de rol masivo, pero no es cierto. Y él nos dará la explicación. So thank you, and you have the stage.
All right.
¿Podemos cambiar la pantalla?
Right. I have no idea what he just said there, so I hope I'm going to talk about what he said I was talking about. I should have put a tie on, then you wouldn't have thought I was as fat as I really am. Okay, so first of all, that previous talk was really good, so I hope you were paying attention because you should have done that. That was very useful information. Now we come to my talk. Recently there's been a lot of excitement around the concept of the metaverse. Money being thrown at things, Facebook changing its name. The metaverse is conceived to be like the internet, but with an embodied interface, so with virtual reality or augmented reality, 3D figures walking around 3D worlds. A lot's been said about how this would improve MMORPGs, massively multiplayer online role-playing games, which I'll call just MMOs or virtual worlds because that's way too long an acronym. So I'm going to look at some of these claims in this presentation. First, though, a little bit about who I am, so you know why I'm here. So this is the game I'm currently playing, Final Fantasy XIV. It's from 2014. Currently, I've played that for 101 days, so that's 24 times 101 hours. Final Fantasy XIV is one of the games I've played a bit of. This is the Secret World Legends from Funcom 2017. I only played that for 45 days when I quit, but I had played the Secret World for 150. So, okay, so this guy does play these games because he doesn't want to watch television, because his wife doesn't watch the same programs as him. Yeah, fair enough. This is Star Wars The Old Republic, which at the time it came out was the most expensive game ever made, might still be. I played 33 days of that, but I only played in elapsed time 137 days. I stopped on the 4th of May, which I thought was a good day to stop for Star Wars. Now, these three games that I've just talked about, they went in different directions. Secret Worlds was trying to bring a world that was contemporary, modern, with different gameplay. Unfortunately, it had a different engine, which is you can't upgrade, so that's why that's stuffed. Star Wars The Old Republic was trying to be the same as everything else, but better, and Final Fantasy XIV was basically bonkers. I mean, it's mad. But all of them were inspired by World of Warcraft, which I played for 245 days, or times 24 to get the hour count. World of Warcraft was inspired by a game called EverQuest. I didn't actually play EverQuest, although somebody did play it and claimed to be me. This was what EverQuest looked like in 1999. EverQuest, however, wasn't a game that was just written out of nothing. EverQuest came from a game called Dikumud. Now, you may notice there's a slight difference in the interface. This one's got graphics, this one's got text, but the pictures are better because they're in your head. Dikumud was a Copenhagen University. Diku is something like Data Logic Institute, Copenhagen Universitet. Dikumud itself was inspired by a game called Abermud from the University of Aberystwyth in the UK. That's what that looked like. That was from 1987, so we're going back quite a way now. And Abermud came from a game called Mud, Multi-User Dungeon, which was written by Roy Trubshaw and Richard Bartle, which is why you're listening to a talk by an old man. It's because that's from 1978, when I was 18. Roy and I wrote that. Mud didn't come from anywhere, so essentially I've been in this industry for longer than you for all definitions of you except for Roy Trubshaw. Now, that explains why I'm here and why I'm interested in massively multiplayer games and why I'm interested in the metaverse, and also why people in the metaverse keep contacting me to find out what minor things they need to know. Well, the first thing is, what's going to be the basis of the metaverse? There are a number of competing platforms. The game ones are Roblox and Fortnite. There's another couple of ones that are selling using cryptocurrency, NFTs and such, which we'll cover a bit later. Decentraland, Sandbox. There's dozens more of these things. They're all coming out. There's lots of money being invested in this. And then, of course, you've got the big companies, Meta, formerly Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Amazon. Not Apple, because Apple doesn't care what happens. It takes 30% of all the money that goes on an Apple platform anyway. Now, the thing is, though, it's the metaverse. It's not a metaverse. It's the metaverse, like it's the internet. So we can't have all these things. And it turns out we've been here before. This is one of the advantages of not having died yet, is that I've seen some of these things before. Back in the 1980s, before the days of the internet, before it was made commercial, the online world was dominated by 5 service providers, all of them in the USA, because the phone calls were free, effectively, there. CompuServe, Prodigy, America Online, Delphi, and Genie were the ones. And they were walled gardens. So you went into one, and that was the one you were in. You couldn't talk to any of the others. None of them would come to you. You were in your own little walled garden. So they didn't talk to each other, didn't talk to anybody else. So it's a bit like Fortnite and Roblox. What you build in Roblox isn't going to fly in Fortnite. When the internet was opened in 1993 for commercial use, they thought, well, this is never going to take off because we've got the users and we've got all the content, and anything that good comes along, we pay people to write the good stuff. Why would anybody go to the internet in general? Well, they were all wrong, because the internet's free, and they weren't. And they were walled gardens. There was more of everything but except you than there was of you. So we don't have 5 internets, we have 1 internet, and it's going to be the same with the metaverse. We won't get a whole bunch of individual metaverses because none of them will talk to each other. The only way you're going to get one that's not owned by people, that's everybody could use, is if the very large companies all talk to each other, take out all the patents, because no way they're going to make it patent-free, and then they're going to try and make a standard. They'd have to bring in the Chinese people as well, because the Chinese people have got 1/5 of the world's population, so you probably would want them in to help as well, and they might have different ideas as to what should be in the metaverse. And it'd have to be an open standard, because if it wasn't an open standard, people would write an open standard, and then they wouldn't use your proprietary standard. So when you hear things about the metaverse, a useful way to look at it is to think, what would this be like if instead of the metaverse, we were just talking about the internet? And if you do that, then it becomes a lot easier. If it makes no sense, then you think, well, why would anybody do that? if it makes no sense, be careful. Right, so having established that where the metaverse is a bit of an amorphous idea, but it probably will get one eventually, what will people do in the metaverse? Well, most of the answers are along the lines of, well, they can, but saying what they can do isn't really answering the question. What will they do? Yeah, you can go to a concert. Yes, you can sit down in a pretend meal with your friends. Yes, you can play these games. Yes, you can watch a movie. But you can do these things anyway. What actually will you do in the metaverse? And so in many respects, the metaverse is a solution looking for a problem. It answers a question that hasn't been asked. It must be good because it's cool. So you can do all these things in the metaverse, but do you need to? And you can do them anyway. Now, we could argue that, well, you could read a book off the internet. We know without the internet, you can read a book. Well, yes, but you can also read it on the internet. It helps, but there's no reason to read a book on the internet. There's no reason to watch a movie on the internet. All you do is use the internet to find the movie to watch. So what is it the metaverse is actually going to deliver that's somehow different and compelling? Well, just because it's not obvious, that doesn't mean it won't be popular and it won't be unique. The VR interface, virtual reality interface, maybe give it critical mass. If virtual reality interfaces are very inexpensive, anyone can use them, then that may be enough, because it really is quite a different experience playing anything through VR than not playing it through VR. At the moment, though, it's pretty clunky, especially with input, trying to select things at a distance with it. Also, since about 2010, the HDMI interface has had 3D capabilities. You could play World of Warcraft with stereoscopic 3D if you just put the glasses on. Nobody does. They can't be bothered to put on a pair of glasses to play World of Warcraft. What are they going to do with VR goggles? What are they going to do with VR goggles when normally you can play sitting down, but if you have to stand up and walk around and keep hitting the room and furniture and cats, well, that's a bit different. So it's quite a hard sell. But if we get the contact lenses, perhaps that would make it easier till someone hacks them. It's certainly got the potential for new applications, and it certainly could improve old ones, but would that be enough to supersede the internet? Well, this is where games come in, because a lot of the technology, pretty well all of it, has already been developed for games, particularly virtual worlds, which is my area. So the people who are out there, like missionaries trying to recruit people to believe that the metaverse is the one true way forward, they're looking for ways to improve virtual worlds, because if we can improve what we already have in a game, then we can improve it for everything. Gamers already understand all the concepts, so they don't need to be educated, they don't need to be run through tutorials, they understand everything that's going on. So if we could integrate virtual worlds into the metaverse, some version of it, that means that it would unlock the metaverse's potential. It would show what you could do. Look at what you can do with these games in the metaverse. It gives content people will want to play because they've got all these games. So that's the reason that they're looking at virtual worlds, because it shows it's a proof of concept for the metaverse. Now, some game designers really like this, because the metaverse is going to bring standards, just like the internet brings standards in it, all the way up through the communications layer, up to the HTML layer, or whatever. So you get common blocks and functionality which you can use between different entities on the Metaverse platforms. So this ought to make creating games faster and less expensive, because if all the things, all the building blocks, everything in the Lego toolbox is already there, then you don't have to make it yourself. It's just ready and you can use it. Now, some of the technologies that are going to come out of the Metaverse work will indeed be very good for games. I don't think they'll be very good for the Metaverse, but they'll be very good for the games. And this is why I don't disapprove of attempts to create the Metaverse, because games will get some nice tech out of it. But the problem at the moment is how the people who support the Metaverse see this as affecting game design. And this is where it becomes very obvious that the ones in charge of the Metaverse have no idea what games are. Let's start with interoperability. Multisyllabic word, so it's therefore impressive. Wouldn't it be great, I have read a talk about this, if you were playing something like Silent Hill and suddenly you saw a Pokemon you could capture? And the idea is, well, players can create their own experiences. You want to be able to play these multiple games, so you're out there and suddenly, oh yeah, Pokemon, yeah, I want to play that game. There's it'll get a little Charizard, bam, bam, got you. He's in my ball. Now, players can create their own experiences. What's wrong with that? Well, it breaks the fiction. It's not really a horror game if suddenly you find little cute monsters wandering around. It breaks the aesthetics, because Pikachu doesn't really look like what you'd expect to see in Silent Hill. It'd be like watching a Star Trek movie and suddenly Gandalf shows up. And Gandalf's all there in his wizened grey outfit covered in dust, and the Star Trek people are on their uniforms in a world that looks like it's been vacuum cleaned 3 times a day. So it just doesn't fit. Now, if it's opt-in only, so you can say, right, I don't want to be playing any game and suddenly it gets interrupted by Pokemon. I want to be playing the game I have and say, allow content from these other games to come in, such as Pokemon. Well, that would be okay, so long as the other players can say, if it's a multiplayer game, I don't want to play with somebody who does that. Because the last thing I want to do, if there's a middle of a boss fight, is die because the healer's going off collecting some Pokemon character that's just showed up. But if you've got this kind of choices, well, it's kind of harmless. I can't see a lot of people wanting to do it, but what do I know? Now, what about taking objects from one game to another? This is where a lot of the big thinking is for Metaverse. Could you, having got your Charizard, send it on Pyramid Head? Could you actually say, right, off you go, kill that for me? Because you've got one, you're in a game world with one of those, and why shouldn't you? Now, of course, this spoils the fiction. So the idea is that you can transform the look and feel of objects so that they make sense in the environment that they're in. This is quite an old idea. This was patented about 20 years ago. That so long ago the patents run out. So if you're in a survival game and you come across an assault rifle, that's epic. Oh, wow, an assault rifle. This is better than a stick. I am so going to survive until the last 10 with this. But in a fantasy world, if you've got an assault rifle, what manner of magic is this? So you need something to transform it into. So assault rifles in this game transform into magic wands. Not that anybody stands there with a magic wand, but a magic wand's got the same functionality, it's the same level of danger and so on. It's just a different look to it and a different fiction hiding behind it. So maybe make it a bow or something. But if you have standard categories of objects and local equivalencies, so does that mean that this would work then? So these are the standard things, big big gun, and the equivalent in all these, in this world, a big gun means an assault rifle. In this one, it means some kind of magic staff, and in this one here, it means some kind of cyberpunk needle gun or something. So you just say, these are what they are, and these are how they translate. Does that mean you could move things between worlds? Well, yes and no. You can do it, but it's not acceptable to developers. And we know it's not acceptable because this has been tried before as well. Back in 1992, remember the text worlds? There was a protocol, Intermud Protocol, which was developed to allow you to move from one text mud to another text mud. Now, text is a lot simpler than graphics. All you need to do is to change a word, and then suddenly it's your AK-47 becomes your atomic crystal 43 or something. But you just translate it into whatever your new environment is. But it failed because of trust issues. So you could import things from other games, but people didn't want things from other games coming into their games. And this is a problem just not going to go away. Because anyone can make their own objects in their own virtual worlds, and this is what happened. People made their own games. They were the only player. They gave themselves the biggest, mightiest, whatever it was, all the gold they needed, and then they tried to move it into another game world because it's allowed people in. So pretty well everybody has an assault rifle. So like America then. Games completely lose the balance this way. It's like going up to a vending machine, pressing the button and saying, give me the biggest thing you've got, I'll have one, thank you. That's pretty well what it allows. So if you're going to let things come into your game, you've got to trust the games that they're coming from. And that makes them pretty well the same game. There's also the problem that what's epic in one game may be standard issue in another. So if you're in a war game, all the soldiers have assault rifles, it's standard issue, it's not epic, and it's different to a survival game where getting one's a big deal. Now, even if you're moving identical objects from one game to another, that's a problem, because their importance values varies from game to game. Apples in a survival game, oh, I have an apple, I shall live today. And apples in a cooking game, I shall make 40 apple pies to level up my apple pie making skill. They're different, even though they're identical objects. If you really wanted to do this, if you really wanted to transform things from one game to another game, so that I have this thing in this game, and I want to have something of equal power in this game, the way to do it is to take those objects and transform them into a special kind of abstract object. And then expand the special kind of abstract object into what it is you want. And we have a word for this special abstract object. It is money. So you sell your super, if it's really good, then it'll get you a lot of money. If it's not very good in the game it's in, it won't get you a lot of money. Then when you go into the other game, you buy something with that money, and that's like transforming it into the other game. So you get an equivalent worth by going through money. Now, interoperability requires tracking, because if you move something from one game to another game and it gets destroyed in that other game, it really should be destroyed in the original one as well. Likewise, if you take it into the other game and sell it in the other game, you should no longer still have it in the original game, because otherwise you'll just keep coming back and selling the same thing. So how would you track it? And this is where we get the I really should look up and see if that's fungible or fungible. Yeah, probably a G, fungible. This is where NFTs come in. So NFTs are stored on blockchains, so they're completely open. Everybody can see who owns the objects. And if two games accept the same blockchains, then the ownership and status of objects can be verified. So you go from one game to another game, take the objects with you on the blockchain. They're given some kind of fancy relook and the new game, and now you've got the object there. This assumes that the games trust each other's content, which they would do if they were by the same developer, for example, but not in a full metaverse. Now, the question then you get is, but if they do trust each other's content, why would you bother with an NFT? Because an NFT is a distributed database. You could just use a shared database. If you trust them, then just look in the database. It's a lot quicker. And it's especially weird when you've got games that use NFTs and the NFTs only work in that one game. Because that's like saying the game doesn't trust itself. Your NFTs basically, I mean, it's a pointer to an item in a database where you could just have the item in the database. And it's not clear what ownership of the NFT gives you anyway. So let's say you're in some kind of world war scenario and there are people, prisoners, and they're in a prisoner of war camp, and they're trying to escape and they've got some wire cutters. So they go up to cut the wires to escape, and the guard sees them, the non-player character guard sees them, comes along to stop them, and the player says, no, you can't have my wire snippers because I paid real money for those. I've got the NFT. You can't take them off me. They're mine. So does that work? Is that what you'd expect? I mean, it would kind of spoil the game. You'd really want the guards to be able to take your wire snippers if they found you. NFTs are popular amongst fans of the metaverse because they introduce scarcity. There's only however many of them they allow to be minted. Basically, scarcity means you can sell it to suckers. Because games can make however many of these they want. You want them, here, have as many as you want, you just take them. Adding scarcity means that there's a limited amount, which means that people who want them will pay more for them, but they're not paying you for them, they're paying other people, other players for them. And they're only worth things while the game's running. There are some issues with them, though. First of all, dupe bugs. These are quite common in MMOs, even today. Essentially, a dupe bug is a mechanism for duplicating objects. For example, in Ultima Online, the way it worked, it was split into, it was a grid-based system, and where the grids met, they were on effectively different servers. So let's call this line here the line between the servers. So I'm giving something to you. So I say, here, have this thing. And you say, thank you, I have received this thing. And I say, I will now delete it from my own inventory. But because it's across a server boundary, it's here, have this thing. Thank you, you can delete this thing. I've logged off. I'm not here anymore. I can't delete the thing. And so now we've both got that thing. And that's an example of a dupe bug. Often happens with currency. RuneScape had these purple party hats. They were really, really rare. A dupe bug, overnight, 2 million of them were made. They were no longer really rare. Now, if you've got a database and something like that happens, then you think, okay, we've got to roll it back for a day. Everybody loses all the play that they had for that day, but we roll it back and we'll stop the dupe bug and then it won't happen. But you can't roll back a distributed database. So if you've got a dupe bug, then people really have those hats. It's just a case of whether you recognize them as having them or not. Other problems, it's hard to keep track of inventory. In role-playing games, inventory is one of the big things. What am I carrying? And you just look and there's a set of boxes and they all show you what they're carrying. Strangely, I remember playing one game and I had to choose between dropping a leaf or dropping 99 cubic meters of ice. I needed an extra space for a quest object. So do I drop the leaf or the 99 cubic meters of ice that occupy the same space in my backpack? I mean, it makes no sense. But anyway, people do expect inventory. And they do expect to be able to say, what am I carrying? They do expect to be able to say, what do I own? But tell me everything in this game that this player owns is really difficult if all those things are on a blockchain. Because you have to look through all the objects and see who owns them and then say, yes, you own this one, no, you don't. Oh, you own this one. You can't index by the player. You can only index by the object, which makes it very difficult, very slow to do this. So effectively, you have to cache it. And if you do cache it, then they can sell the object without you knowing. As for real estate, as in it's virtual estate, it isn't real, it's land, virtual land. In games in general, this does make sense. You might want to buy a guild house or your own home and decorate it because it's sticky and people like being able to create a little nest in a virtual world. But doesn't make sense on the internet in general. So imagine that there was a hard limit on the number of web pages on the internet. I don't mean the number of addresses, I mean the actual number of pages. If there was a hard limit on it, well, the internet would be unusable. I mean, in theory, there is a hard limit because the universe is finite, but nevertheless, to all practical purposes, it's not a hard limit. So the internet would not have got far if there was only a limited number of web pages that could be owned. Now, real estate is valueless if you can teleport. It doesn't matter where it is. So whenever you look to buying houses or something, it's always location, location, location. That's the three most important things when you're buying a property. Where it is, and where it is. And that matters in the real world because they've stopped manufacturing Earth. But it doesn't matter in a virtual world because they can make as much of this as they want. And the location is irrelevant because you can just teleport to where all the action is. And if you can't teleport, you actually have to walk there in the 3D environment. Well, that means you've got to walk past 20 random buildings. And those 20 random buildings could be anything. It would be like going to a website that you want to go to, but you have to scroll down a list of other websites. Yeah, LinkedIn, yeah, Pornhub, yeah, Uncle Joe's blog, blah, blah, all the way down. That's where I want to go, YouTube. I mean, it makes no sense on the regular internet, and it would not make sense on a metaverse platform. You just want to go to where it is straight away. Now, this is all well understood. This has been done in Second Life. This was done, in fact, it was done in Text Worlds, Lambda Moo, in like the late 80s, early 90s. So this is all well understood. But the people who are coming at the metaverse from the outside, the entrepreneurs, they don't understand it's all been done, and they don't understand these problems, and they don't understand they're going to have the same problems when they make it again. So metaverse land is effectively infinite in supply. All you need is a hosting service, and that could be your own PC at home. There are plenty of people who run text muds at home. Intellectual property. This is going to be a mess in the metaverse as well. Until laws are made, I'm sure that the laws that are made in the EU, the USA, and China will all be compatible. If you've got a team of AAA artists, their job is creating AAA art, they'll kind of want some royalties if you use it. Not just buying it off you, they want royalties every time you use it because theirs is the best. They'll also want it if someone visiting your game uses it. Maybe somebody else is a rival. Maybe they don't mind it being used for these games, but not for this game. There's a paint The World's Blackest Black. It was made and it was bought by Anish Kapoor, who's a British artist. He bought it, so he's the only person allowed to use The World's Blackest Black. So one artist got so annoyed about this that he researched, did chemistry and materials science until he found a black that was darker. And he will sell that to anybody if they are not Anish Kapoor. So when you buy it, you have to sign, I am not Anish Kapoor, and then he'll sell it to you. So it could be like this. There could be people saying, yeah, you rip me off once too often. If you remember the previous talk, being nice to people. If you're not nice to somebody, they may remember. And they could prevent it from working in your game. What's more, they can do it retroactively. There are terrible stories of people have built entire Stack Exchange modules based on individual bits of text, and then someone said, oh, I've got to take that out because the local laws have changed, and the whole structures have collapsed because everybody was using that free piece of code. It might be that players get low-res versions of things and then can pay more for high-res versions. That might be possible, but the thing is, who owns this and in what form is always a problem. When you think you're buying music, you're not buying music. You're buying a particular form of music that works on a particular player that you've got. And the player and the form and the publishers, all the way back to the artist, they all own this. This is Raf Costa's done a good talk on that if you want to look it up. And this isn't just visual art. That's just easiest to explain. It's sound, it's music, it's animation. It's also functionality, code. What happens when you summon a lift, summon an elevator? Well, someone will have written code for that, and if you're using it, shouldn't they get some money for that? Now, the thing about intellectual property is, well, the lawyers will sort that out. It'll all be managed by lawyers. We're not lawyers, we're entrepreneurs. And one of the big features of the metaverse is that it allows creativity. So people can create their own art. They can create their own fashion. They can create their own code, their own music. They can build all these things in the metaverse. You can create the content, you can sell the content, and you could make a living off the metaverse. And this sounds really good, because if you're an entrepreneur, that's how you think the world works. But that isn't how the world works. You can do the same thing on the App Store. I don't know how many millions of games there are on the App Store, but if you put a game on the App Store, it's not going to be noticed except by your friends or people who mistype the title. You can put music on Spotify. I don't know, I think it's 20,000 titles a day go on Spotify. You can write books for the Kindle store. There are millions and millions of books. Many of them are readable. You can make things on Etsy. Somebody might have sufficiently low taste to think your drawing of a dragon looks like a dragon. The thing is, although you can make money off these, only the people with the right luck or the right connections do make money off it. So saying everyone's going to be making money off the metaverse is not going to happen. Most people are not going to make it, just like most people do not make a fortune off Roblox. 95%, this is Sturgeon's law, I think he said 90 actually, of creative work is rubbish. The trouble is that most people think that theirs is in the 5% that isn't the rubbish, and are annoyed when they can't sell it, or it's not recognized by big publishing. Another idea that seems to be popular is play to earn, or work. So you're playing the game, and as you play the game, you gradually accumulate things, cryptocurrency, NFTs, which you can then sell to the players in the game who can't be bothered to grind that. Now, there is such a thing as play to earn. Esports is play to earn. Professional sports is play to earn. A soccer player is earning money from playing the game if they're in an elite league. But it's not the same as that. The way this works is it's 15 guys in Indonesia who are working for less than minimum wage, minting NFTs for crypto coins that you will buy off them. But it won't be for enough to give them an income worth having. The developer could give all this away for free. The developer could say, oh, well, instead of minting these crypto, why don't you just give people the stuff, and you just have it? But they don't do that. It's not clear why they don't do that. I don't think the idea is that they're helping third world economies. What will happen, and we've seen this before, is pay to earn will be dominated by organized gangs. It's the same thing as happened in Second Life. If you want to buy some property in Second Life, you don't buy it off Linden Labs, you buy it off somebody who bought the property before you and has done, well, maybe they've done something to make it look nice, but they don't have to have done. Essentially, you're just paying them because they've been squatting on it. EVE Online, again, this is EVE Online's a bit more game-oriented. Well, it's entirely more game-oriented, but the big groups, the big consortia of companies, the alliances, they're the ones that control everything. It's even the same with regular Bitcoin mining. It's all controlled by about half a dozen huge data centers that are doing all the mining. The other thing is that if people are paid to play, then play itself loses its intrinsic value. There's a thing called the over-justification effect, which I won't go into here. But essentially what it says is, if you are rewarded for something that you previously found rewarding anyway, but you're given an extrinsic reward, like money, for doing something which was previously fun or otherwise enjoyable, it stops becoming fun and enjoyable. So pay to earn is doing that. The people who are paying, play to earn, people who are playing are not going to be enjoying themselves. It's just work for them. Some other quick points, because we're getting low on time. Toxicity is going to be worse in the metaverse than in MMOs, because you get coordinated guilds of millions of jerks instead of just hundreds. Client software can render people differently to how they see themselves. So you've spent all your time dressing in these fancy things that you've paid a lot of money for, so you look exquisite. But on somebody else's client, they've just bought the anime mode and everybody looks like an anime. Or anybody looks like a cat. Anybody looks like Donald Trump. Another question, this is one where I could give a 50, in fact I have a 50-slide talk on it. Could artificial intelligent non-player characters move from one game to another? You can move from one part of the metaverse to another. Could a non-player character do it? Could they say, okay, my employer wants me to get some honey, there is no honey here, but I know where there's honey, I'll go off into this other game, get some honey, come back, and then my employer has the honey. I wrote a book about this, How to Be a God. You can buy it off Amazon, or if you go to that website, there is a free version. You don't have to sign up or anything, because I can't be bothered with that stuff. You can just download the PDF. Then we come to technical problems. This is the file format for transferring 3D objects. There are technical issues, and they are really heavy. They have yet to be solved, and we've been working on this for decades. We've had the functionality that the metaverse needs, but not integrated. But integrating it is non-trivial. Even after all this time, creating simple working objects like a door is not trivial. If you make a virtual world and you want to implement a door, well, it's not easy. You'll find that most virtual worlds do not have doors. And when they do have doors, they open and close automatically. There's no such thing as a key, because they're complicated things. And the interactions that go on, there's dozens of interactions, and they're all between different data sets. the animation data set, the functionality data set, the data, it's in a hierarchy, so it inherits from other objects to build itself. All these are all separate databases, they all have interactions, and unless you've got access to all the databases, it's very difficult to create the objects. This is a lamp. When I switch the lamp on, it creates light of this brightness, of this wavelength, for this length of time. These are all decisions that have to be made, all have to be stored in a database, and if you just try and say, oh, well, we'll just pluck it from there, that isn't going to happen. That's got to be done there's going to be much more standards. So on the technical side of things, there's big problems with the metaverse. But if they solve those problems, then that's great for games, which is kind of why I don't mind people making the metaverse, because we get some games usable solutions. That said, standards, although they are a good thing, they can stifle innovation. Text mods all used to be different, multiple different genres, and different gameplay. Because they were all coded from scratch, until people created engines. And then we got what was called stock mud syndrome. There was a DikuMuds in particular. People would download a DikuMud. It ran straight out of the box. 2,000 DikuMuds, of which 100 were unique, and the others were pretty much the same as each other. So we called it stock mud syndrome. And similar things are happening with Unity, I see with my students. People are writing original games that are just like all the other original games that use the same tools and assets, because it pushes you in a certain direction. We might see stock Unity syndrome. We might see stock Metaverse syndrome. Because if there's too much standards and not enough variability, everybody works to the standards and then everybody's constrained by them. Right, so last slide. All the components of the metaverse have already been done in MMOs. More work's still needed, some of which will help MMOs. Not all these components are popular amongst gamers. In fact, most of them are very unpopular amongst gamers. But if the people who like real money trading and non-fungible tokens, cryptocurrency, and being jerks all migrate to the metaverse, that would be wonderful, because then gamers would finally get their games back. Right, that's my talk.
Thank you very much.
Questions?
Preguntas. Questions. Raise your hands. No me seáis tímidas ni tímidos, que se hace que estamos al tú. Un micrófono aquí, por favor.
Hola.
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks a lot for your talk. It was really insightful. It was a pleasure to have you here. So my question is that, well, as you said, no, solving all these technical issues is mind-boggling, so it's going to be very complicated, even if we can do this. No? But at the end, there is problem zero, no? Which, as you said, the internet exists because at the end, all the walled gardens agreed, no, to say, okay, people from my walled garden can communicate with you. Do you actually see that the current technological giants will break their walled gardens, or they will try just to keep everything for themselves? So we will never get
well,
here.
We will get something like this eventually, but we may have to go through a number of steps first. The technical people are already writing proposals for a metaverse open standard, and the more they write, the more they realize that this is a lot more difficult, a lot harder than they were hoping. Or maybe they knew to start with, but the people paying them didn't. We will see the walled gardens, I'm pretty sure. Everybody's saying, we're making the metaverse, or we're making a metaverse, which means they don't even understand what the concept is. And there will be different silos where you can go. But to achieve its overall purpose, we would need to have open standards and open architecture so everyone can see what's going on. It could be owned by a company or a consortium. I mean, 90% of the world's phones are Androids, which is owned by Google, but at least that's open, and you can see what's going on. And Google is not... it may be evil, but it's not as evil as Apple. Let's put it that way. So that's just an opinion, by the way. That's not truth, if anyone's a lawyer out there. But we will have to. I mean, there are plenty. PDF is, and even some of the standard in SQL is owned, but they're generally allowed. Java, the language, is owned, but it's open. So these can work, but it doesn't work if everybody's got their own and they won't talk to each other, because we saw this. We did see sometimes in the walled garden days where you'd have the same game running in two separate walled gardens, and you might have two databases drawing the weather from the same real-world military database or something like that, but they didn't talk to each other. I mean, if you imagine what the internet would have been like if it wasn't open standards, you'd be paying for every web page you visited. And you can imagine, well, could that happen with a metaverse rather than the metaverse? Yeah, did that answer the question? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that you have hope that even though maybe it not will be completely balanced and there will be some company that will be above the rest, at the end we will have a metaverse.
Well, we
and
will,
people
yes.
will kind of collaborate.
Yeah, in the end we will get a metaverse, whether it's as ubiquitous, as popular as the interverse or internet, or whether it's just another interface for it that's useful for some tasks but not others. Because if you want to watch a movie, then having to walk down a street of movie theatres and select the movie theatre you go in there and walk in there with your avatar and sit down in an audience with other avatars and watch on a screen, when you could just watch it on the screen, seems pointless. But that doesn't mean that there isn't something out there that the metaverse could do, which wouldn't be pointless, and you can't do it with a regular internet. It might be that, I don't know, concerts or football matches or anything where there's a big audience and you want to be in the audience with other people, at least feel that they're there, hear the roar of the crowds because you're shouting in your bedroom and hundreds of other people are shouting in their bedrooms, and that might bring something new, but we'll have to see. Yeah, so ultimately we'll get this, but whether it'll be as exciting as they think, and whether it's in the next few years or the next few decades is another matter.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Any more questions?
¿Alguna otra pregunta? Allá arriba, a la derecha, por favor.
The furthest person away.
Farther away.
It's okay?
Yeah.
It's a bit personal. It has to be with the MMO part of the speak. I remember as a kid growing up with 2D games, and then one day in the school, my friend told me there is a game that is 3D, and you can see other people playing in the same time, and I can't believe it. It was Lineage 2, and it was my first MMO, and I played for like 100 days in only one course of my life. I don't know how I proved that course. So I remember that feeling of magic, of going into any places that were empty, meaningless in the playful thing. But it was some kind of magic of discovering and enjoying the I need to go there to see if there is somewhere, there is something that until then, I didn't experience, yes. So I wanted to ask you if you did, since you have been there since the beginning, if you have experienced these kind of things with a game.
I haven't experienced them in games because I have been there since the beginning. So I've always been a god rather than a mortal, if you want to put it that way. But I have experienced it in real life. When I grew up in England was very, well, it was like 20 kilometers east of nowhere. It was the remotest place. And the first time I went to London, I couldn't believe it. I said, oh, wow, I'm walking up this street. There's Buckingham Palace. There's the Houses of Parliament. There's 10 Downing Street, where the Prime Minister... It was awesome. And the thing is that my kids never experienced that because they went on a school trip when they were 9. So when they grew up older and went to London, they didn't have that experience. The experience you got with Lineage 2, which also descends directly from Mud via Jake Song in Korea, that is not an experience that kids today would get because they will have played 3D single-player games, and so for them, it's not the stupendous leap it was to you. When people first saw Mud, it was mind blown. What? This is another person? Now, these days, that's not at all going to impress anybody. But back then it did. Lineage, if you play Lineage, people now will, oh yeah, okay, so it's isometric 3D graphics, yeah. But they'll have seen other games, 3D, haven't got that viewpoint. They'll perhaps prefer, they'd probably look at it and think it's some kind of strategy game, if they just saw it. Because they've played games growing up, and they've seen these things before. So when the Metaverse comes along and people go in there, yeah, the first few visitors might be thinking, oh, this is fantastic. Like the first time you put the 3D goggles on, think, woohoo, it looks as though I'm walking over a narrow plank. What happens if I do this? Oh, it's not a narrow plank, it's just the ground. But the effects you get after a while, you get used to them. They're not as awesome as they were to start with. If you could recapture that, it would be great. But I don't think that's going to happen now. Games are just too well known. There are some. I mean, there is an argument that you start off with text, but people want pictures, so you add the pictures, but people want animation, so you add the animation, and then people want it 3D, so you give them the 3D, and then they want it VR, so you give them the VR. And then after a while, then they want data gloves, so you give them the data gloves, and you keep adding things until eventually people are just jacking in and they're playing a game. But all you're giving them in these later stages is you're overriding the senses. You're saying, this is what you're seeing, I'm showing you it. But that isn't where the power of games lie. The power of games is in the imagination. You want to speak to the imagination, not to the senses. The senses is just a way of speaking to the imagination. And what you want to be able to say is, here is a dragon. It is a fearsome dragon. It is one scary dragon. And you can describe the dragon, an immense fire-breathing dragon, beats its enormous wings above you. Now, I've just said that, and each one of you will have your own version of a dragon. And that dragon will be particular to you. And it'll be, if you're playing a game, that description of the dragon is the one you want at that moment. It's not the one that I, as the game designer, have inserted in visually for you. Because if you speak to the imagination, then you can poke things into people's brains and they can't stop it. And we have a technology for doing that, and that's text. So it started with text, you push it as far as you can get, and you end up with text. because instead of speaking to the senses, you eventually end up coming back and speaking to the imagination, which is where all the action is. So we might see it again. Who knows?
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there any more questions, anybody?
¿Alguna otra pregunta más?
Probably run out of time, but no?
Okay. First of all, thank you for coming to Canaria, and I hope you are enjoying Tenerife.
I've been here for an hour.
Well, okay. Moving beyond the reality of the metaverse, you say earlier that it has to. We have to complete some steps to being really in the metaverse. What do you think is the next step we have to complete?
Well, the next step will be failure, and then people will retreat, and some of them will bounce back, as we had in the previous talk, and the ones that bounce back will have learned their lessons. They will know that these things have been learned. We may also find metaverse technology coming out of virtual world development. So people who are making the next generation of MMOs will be thinking, well, this could be used for a metaverse platform, but essentially because they want to be able to play the game wherever you are on whatever device you have. I mean, obviously not a laser pointer, but some of you might even be able to play some of it on a watch. You know, it doesn't have to be that sufficient. So you can imagine that some developers of virtual worlds will be pushing from the bottom up. They'll be making evolutionary changes, whereas the people who've been coming from the outside have been trying to make revolutionary changes. Sometimes revolutions don't work. They fail. And then you have to say, well, why did it fail? Do we still want a revolution? Can we make changes other ways? Can we get to where we want to be other ways? So it's a general rolling concept. But the things that they would need to know is forget about NFTs, because everybody other than the people buying them knows what they are. They are Ponzi schemes, pyramid schemes. They are ways of getting money off people who believe that it's going to have value, and eventually it won't. If it's got some in-game technology use, then that's great, but you don't need an NFT for that. So getting rid of some of these crypto arguments would probably be the first major concession that would have to be made. And then we can look at what we want as a thing, rather than as a way of ripping off consumers.
Okay. We are just running out of time. Gracias a todas y a todos por venir esta mañana. Espero que os haya gustado las sesiones. Thank you very much, Richard, for coming. And un aplauso. Recordar que por la tarde seguimos en las otras salas con un montón más de conferencias. Gracias y nos vemos luego.